Hi everybody and welcome to today's MediaWorks Masterclass. Today we're into the new series, which is really exciting. So we're focusing on user experience. Today's going to focus on designing to dominate, and I think it's a really important topic. We know that driving traffic to websites, that whole user experience, and not just the experience when on site, but sort of how that whole customer journey plays out, so important, Johnny. And I know as part of this series, we're really keen to start talk about that. I guess start with introductions. I guess a lot of people joining will know who I am, but my name's David Norris. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at MediaWorks, and I'll be hosting today's MediaWorks Masterclass. And today I've got Johnny.
And I'm Johnny. Nice to meet everyone. I'm the UX Director at MediaWorks. So my role sits in between our data and insights team, our design team, and our development team to ultimately understand the end-to-end experience for our user and how we design to dominate in that space.
So I think the next point for me, and it's a really important point, is we always like to give something away as well on the back of these, Johnny. So we wanted to actually sort of just put out there that, you know, please feel free to sign up to the free one-to-one optimization consultation that we're offering, be with either yourself or a member of the user experience team, where we'll focus on a review of your digital experience to identify ways to optimize, to drive performance and conversion. Again, anybody who wants to sign up for that, please do. It's a no obligation chat, so you know, it doesn't matter if you're an existing client of ours, somebody that we're looking to work with, or somebody that we've not heard from previously. By all means, click on the link in the chat, sign up and give us a bit of information, and we'll give you a free 30-minute typically one-to-one consultation at some point over the next few weeks. So as I said, really exciting to be starting the new Masterclass series. The first one today is going to be focusing on design to dominate, but obviously we're covering all aspects of user experience as we go through this. It's worth shouting out that we've then got Masterclass 2, creating forms that actually convert, which will actually see me not hosting the Masterclass for a change. I'll be on my holidays, so Paul Mallet will be stepping in, which will be great. Then on Masterclass 3, turning browsers into buyers, where we'll be talking about designing product display pages that generate engagement, really sort of powerful, impactful aspect of user experience, like turning those browsers into buyers. And in Masterclass 4, again, I always say it's never going to be a Masterclass series in 2025 if we're not talking about AI in some way, shape or form. So we're looking at AI in the future of website experience, so how AI is changing user behavior and expectancy, which sort of links in as well with the past couple of series that we've done around SEO, with things like AIOs and AI mode coming into play from a paid media experience, around how all of that's playing out. And again, you know, we're hearing things about AI Max, where we touched on last week, where it's talking about sort of changing and developing sort of those different landing pages based on campaign types, etc. So there's going to be loads and loads for us to talk about over the next 4 sessions. So really looking forward to that. So I guess for me, Johnny, when we start to talk about design, what are we actually specifically talking about?
So I thought it was an interesting point to start on, because we're with the masterclass called Design to Dominate, we're looking at design, but design can be such a broad spectrum of things that we're looking at. It can just be that when we reference design, it's look and feel and what something looks like, but actually there's so many more skills and definitive outputs that go into that. And really the way we're considering this is understanding the user experience first, and actually what goes behind that, understanding from the moment we're looking at information architectures, grouping content, understanding a structure of a site, how someone moves through, into more of that UI focus. So user interface design, how does that look and feel? How do we start designing for the intricacies of the way someone interacts and engages with individual assets and pieces to a page, all the way then through to sort of content design. What are the assets that help reduce thought time and help drive people through? How do we understand the way that we want content to be shaped around our users, how we want to talk to our users? And I think it's really important to understand how broad that spectrum is, that design isn't just how it looks, it is actually everything that sits around that as well.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of, I appreciate you've been at MediaWorks slightly longer than me, but we've both been here over 5 years. I think it's really interesting, isn't it, in the sense that for me, this masterclass plays into how we developed as an organization, really. You know, we were a performance agency when we established sort of 18 years ago, and we were focused primarily on things like SEO and PPC. And then we moved into sort of that technology website play, because we were like, if we're driving all of this traffic into a website or portal or mobile app, like, let's really think about how we own that and align with that. And then over the last sort of 6 years, we've integrated things like creative into the agency and looking at that from a viewpoint. And I think that, for me, and I'm conscious we'll have a lot of, you know, website sort of managers and web leads on the call, but also we'll have lots of sort of marketing managers and marketing directors, etc., on this call today as well. So I think it's really important, because I think sometimes we could become sort of, I've seen a lot of instances where it's often two totally separate areas. You almost have marketing and then you have website. And I think for us, it's so important to join those and align those.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think it's important to have this synergy between the two different areas, multiple different areas. I often see when I have calls with external teams as well, where they'll split a user's journey up with different teams as well. They'll have a team around the product pages, they'll have a team around the checkout pages, and it's almost, you need to match all of that up and then layer in the brand and then layer in the assets and the content to actually understand how you're treating users in an end-to-end space. And actually all of that is the design. So design is much wider than how something looks on a page. It's actually bringing together a lot of different people and a lot of different sort of specialisms to understand how we're treating our user.
Yeah, I think, as I say, I think this is going to be a fascinating series, because we're going to talk so much about that end-to-end experience, and I think it's so important. So I guess sort of we talk about this, why doesn't good design always perform? And I think, like, when we look at this, I think, like, we've broken this down into a number of areas, haven't we, Johnny?
Yeah, so I've split this down, and really it's a conversation that I always end up having with a lot of businesses, especially when we're looking at running a sort of course of CRO or optimizational process. What we're effectively then looking at is design needs to encapsulate a lot of thought that goes into lots of different aspects, and we often see this when we're looking to optimize. We'll pick up on this, we've broken this down into sort of 6 pieces here, but actually there's a lot more, and what I'm trying to then think about is how we drive conversion through that. So the first point I touched on here is that pretty doesn't always mean persuasive. Something that looks good doesn't always mean it performs. It doesn't mean that you have the substance that sits behind that. Users will come, they'll want to know a lot more about you, your product. How can I trust you? What can I do? What do you want me to do? What's the expectancy? Just because something looks flashy, nice, doesn't always get you there. And we've often seen sometimes with our clients that actually, because they've almost shifted into a space of, well, this looks nice and we feel like it represents a brand. But actually, have you looked at the content? Have you looked at the information architecture that then means that you are more visible for all of these key terms? And not to go too deep in that direction, but the amount of times where we've seen websites sort of fall off a cliff from a visibility point of view because they've created something that looks nice but not considered the wider content picture around that.
Yeah, and then I think the second one would be sort of this point about sort of missing conversion triggers. Like, it's so important, that, isn't it?
Yeah, when someone's on that purchase journey, and I'll touch on it a little bit later on as well, like, trust is everything. People want to go through that process of understanding you as a brand, trusting you in terms of getting reference that they are not, they're in a good space here. And then having a clear call to action. It's really important to tell somebody, probably within the first 5 to 10 seconds, not only who you are, but what you want them to do.
Yeah.
Am I purchasing something? Am I signing up to something? Am I expected to complete a contact form? Because then they can do their own research, but really in the back of their mind, they then have an understanding of what the end goal is and what the end purpose of this journey is.
Yeah. And then content not aligned with user intent. I mean, we do a lot of work, don't we, around content, where it sits in the hierarchy of educational, informational, transactional, etc. But it's about really understanding what you are trying to do at each part of the journey, isn't it?
And I think, yeah, I think that's a piece I work really closely with Paul Mallet at this side to understand where we can better align this content, but it's understanding a mixture of those areas, informational, transactional, what we're driving people through, but also a level of empathy. Whereas somebody out on that journey, not all websites are designed to convert as such in the key term. Some might be there to build brand awareness. Some might be there to increase self-serve and stop calls coming through to a specific call center. Well, actually, then the content needs to reflect that. It needs to build empathy, knowing where somebody's at a certain stage of their journey. Are they in a good place? Are they in a negative space? Like, we need to align content to where they are and then bring them back into the journey we want them to have with that. It can't always just be a static one tone that follows us all the way through.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing for me, especially in the world that we're living in now with things like AI, and we see a lot of this where people are using, for example, like AI to produce content on websites. And I think like you often see what you'll get is quite a consistent tone of voice, because it's quite good at doing tone of voice piece, you know, get something to feel like it's written by this, you know, it's a very easy comparison. But again, it's just missing those like emotional cues and understanding the wider context, which is one of its many, by the way, flaws. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's definitely something to look out for, because you've got to differentiate between the stages in the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't always know where a user's sort of sentiment is at. Like, we work with obviously a broad spectrum of sectors, and if we were to say it's e-commerce or very sort of hard lead gen or sign-ups, then it almost needs to be in that direction, quite direct. We're driving people through. But actually, if we're looking in a space where it's social housing, for example, well, actually somebody might be in a space where they're struggling with payments or struggling with a situation that we need a level of empathy into this and really start to write content that is going to help somebody through what is a very tough time for them. And yes, the sort of AI approach can help us define a tone that aligns to our organization, but it doesn't always have that level of empathy where actually somebody going through and just understanding where somebody is in their space can just help us realign some of that content.
Then aesthetics over functionality. It's a we've sort of touched on this a little actually, and we will touch on this like massively as we go through sort of the session. But I guess, talk me through that.
So quite often, I think a lot of, especially around the audit pieces we do, and a lot of the conversations we have with people around performance driven, and we always say, look, you know, you can have the best designed user experience in the world, but if your website doesn't perform, then there's an instant frustration that comes out of that. And while it was amazing to have motion, animation, creative approaches to websites, there's a couple of aspects we have to consider. One of them being load speed.
Yeah.
You know, if I had a conversation, and I'm not going to say who it was, with somebody yesterday around page load speed being 90 seconds, which is insane to think about when you really want to be hitting it at about 2 seconds. But that was mainly because of the way it was technically built, and then the way the content loaded on page. It was loading everything in one go. So you're almost waiting longer to get that content. The user is not going to hang around for that. And then it's just in terms of that functionality piece, it is, how do we keep a user focused? We want to make sure that somebody moves into that space, knows what they're doing, moves to the next step, gets the information they want, and sees your capability and understands the brand a bit, but the focus should be primarily around what we want a user to do. And I suppose that touches on this piece. It's that over-designed journeys, and it's really we often, again, in the CRO space, have conversations around over-designed journeys, whereby it almost feels like in some instances things have been bolted on over time, and the journey starts to become so unwieldy that it's actually, we just need to pare that all the way back. A lot of this happens when I'm working closely with the paid team, because obviously they come into a space where they're looking to drive traffic to a site, and we'll have conversations where they'll say, actually, we're looking to drive it to this area, but actually there's 6 steps to sign up here. When actually, if we just had a campaign landing page, stripped it right back and had a very focused page, it would be so much easier. And it's all about that. It's just taking a step back every now and again to understand, yes, you might add some functionality, you might add some content, you might add some information, but over time that becomes quite a bloated experience.
Yeah.
So you need to take that step back with it.
I think the one that I often see is you speak to clients about this or speak to prospects about this, and it's like they often are able to really, really intricately articulate sort of their perfect user journey. You know, like they land on this page, then they go to this page, then they go to this page. That, you know, and you sat there going, yeah, but what happens when the user doesn't do that? You know, and I think like for me, it's like so important to have that consideration and really think about that. And I think like then you fall into this, don't you, Johnny, the vanity metrics trap. Like we see this all the time where, again, what are we actually measuring? Are we measuring the things that actually really matter?
Yeah, I think it's really important for me when we have these conversations with clients. There's a few times that I've had this conversation where we're saying, you know, we're trying to measure bounce rate or exit rate. Well, actually, are we doing that aligned to what we want people to do? Scroll depth was an interesting conversation I had the other day around people aren't going to scroll that far down page. You don't know that? Try it. Let's put it into an A/B test and actually see how people interact. People are a lot more exploratory than they probably were a couple of years ago. Like they understand websites have longer pages and they want to explore that content. We need to be more direct in certain situations, but we can allow them that exploration as well. And I think it's defining the right metrics here. It's really understanding that end-to-end piece. If it is direct, you know, sign-ups through to leads, through to actually qualifying those leads and taking it through. Measure that, because that gives us the understanding of how somebody's engaging with the site. Is it the right person? Are they doing the right things? And how are they engaging with that? Not just taking that number of, well, we've had 20 leads come through and that's perfect. Like, what are they doing?
Yeah, and I think just to reiterate again, you know, as part of some of those free audits that we talked about at the beginning, if someone does want to sign up, these will be a number of the things that we are actually looking at and really doing a bit of a deeper dive into. So I guess then, how do design choices directly influence behavior and conversion, Johnny? So again, like, let's talk about broadly about that. I know we've got a number of points.
Yeah, and I think clarity first is pretty much understanding that your user comes to your website and wants to know who you are, what you do within 5 seconds. Yeah. You have 5 seconds to really do that. So we see and have seen a number of times where somebody will land on a website and see a very vague statement of what you do. Yeah. It's not enough. We need to be really clear and concise on our approach. Even more so in a paid space. If we're driving somebody through from a paid ad onto a landing page, we need to be really following up on the offer that we're kind of putting in that space. And I think for me, this one is a perfect test to do. I suppose anyone can do this, is just speak to anyone and ask them what your website does within 5 seconds of viewing it, and just see what they do. If it is not a clear output, then there's a content issue.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's how hard you've worked, especially in this day and age, how hard you are having to work to drive that traffic through whatever channels you're going through, whether it be email, whether it be referral traffic, whether it be direct to site, whether it be through SEO, PPC, however you've got that traffic to the site. For me, it's like, it's such a missed opportunity if then what you do is you fail when they land on your site. So I think that for me is such an important factor. I'm conscious of like friction kills conversion.
Yeah, I think as we were trying to say, complex checkouts reduce conversion rates by 35%. I think we've had some really good chats in the last sort of few weeks, months with payment gateway providers, understanding where they're at, like how can they simplify their journeys, working with them to understand the steps that someone goes through. But this is the most crucial point in someone's journey. Yeah. If it's, let's take e-commerce for instance, somebody goes through the process, picks a product, puts it in their basket, gets as far as their basket. The amount of times we see a huge dropout at this stage is every time we speak to somebody, there's a huge dropout there. What effectively we're doing there is the user will see a huge amount of risk at this point of their journey, and they'll be looking subliminally for any reason to back out of what they're doing right now. Yeah. And it's a subliminal thing. We'll all do the same because you see a monetary value and you know that you're about to spend that amount of money. So subliminally, they'll be looking for a route out. And what often you see in these spaces is loads of distractions. You'll see the full navigation will still be in place. There'll be buttons that someone can click. Oh, I'll go back and I'll just double check it's the right product.
Sign up for a loyalty scheme, become a member, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, we see a lot of this. Sign up, put your email here and get 10% off. Well, actually, you're driving somebody to their emails and not just through the purchase process. In this space, what we want to really do is just create a really concise route through that checkout journey, ask them just for the key information that's going to drive it, maybe give some USPs that remove risk, free returns or free delivery or whatever those USPs are, just to help drive that forward. Maybe some reviews if we've got things in that space, but ultimately just reduce the amount of distraction that sits in that space. Will in fact increase that journey.
Yeah, and then trust signals. Again, we'll talk about this a lot in future masterclasses that we're covering, but this is such an important piece, isn't it, in the web where there is so much optionality, so much competition, etc. Like, trust is enormous, isn't it?
Trust is huge. Trust is everything. We recently worked on a CRO project where one of our lines actually stepped away from optimizing on-site experience to just say, we just need to work together to build your Trustpilot rating.
Yeah.
And we need to do that by just making sure we've got automation in place, we're following up, we're getting reviews, because actually with where the reviews are at, although they weren't necessarily bad, they could have been better. And what we're seeing is such a competitive space between you and your competing companies for a purchase, that actually, if you can just show that your marker is a little bit more trusted by people out there through a third-party tool, it can actually just drive that conversion. I think it needs to be primarily through third-party space. I think we need to be looking at, your Trustpilots, your FIFOs, because people understand that those platforms are there and it's a more trusted view. Outgoing are the days of testimonials on websites. They do hold some value if you don't have the reviews there to start with. But I'd always lean into those reviews where we can and make sure that we're trying to get them as strong as possible.
Yeah, because I think it starts in the SERP, doesn't it, now, when you think about it, with Google reviews, that's a massive factor now for a lot of, if I'm choosing which car garage I'm going to take my car to get it serviced. I wouldn't do that, by the way, I'm useless with cars. But if I was going to do that, it's like, I'm looking at sort of the Google reviews of the providers there before even clicking into the site. So I think it's so important that, again, we join up not just the on-site but the off-site experience, and it's often a really big missed opportunity. And then I guess, Johnny, speed does matter. We talk about the website space. You mentioned 90 seconds there, which knocks me off my feet. Got on sat down for that one. But it's so important, isn't it, that website speed, because consumers, we're impatient. We're increasingly impatient. It's like, I take my children out, the internet doesn't work for them in a place, and it's like, they're going, the internet doesn't work, and I'll be like, no, it took 5 seconds to load. It doesn't mean that it's not working. But, we're exactly the same from a consumer perspective. Anything that gives us a reason to jump out, we take.
Yeah, absolutely. And at 3 second load speed, it says it is about 2.5 actually, in terms of time you have. But behavioral approaches, we're seeing, I suppose, now to go into maybe generational stuff, is, you get reels, you get very short form content. There's a very short attention span in that space. And if there's any attempt where it goes beyond that couple of seconds, like you just said, the example there is, it's not working, it's wrong. With that then comes a level of trust. If that is taking too long to load, I don't trust it. I'll just go to a competitor where it's easier. I'll go and find something in another space. Like, it all kind of merges together as one route through that trust view. But yeah, we need to make sure that you can, like I said before, you can have the best UX and an experience, end-to-end experience. But if that site is loading at 10 seconds, someone just isn't going to give it that time.
And then accessibility, finally, accessibility is opportunity, isn't it? And we've done I think, I know we're not going to talk too much about this because we did a full session on accessibility with our partner Recite Me in this space. So again, I think it's just worth calling out, like, 1 in 4 UK users have a disability. Accessible design expands market reach and trust. Like, it's such an opportunity, isn't it, in terms of the amount of websites that don't cater towards accessibility needs is amazing.
Yeah, massive. 24% of people in the UK have a disability or an additional need, and you consider that's people who would consider themselves part of the disabled community.
Yeah.
You then have people who potentially wouldn't consider themselves part of that. People who have dyslexia, or people who have, where we still have to cater for an additional need. So that is actually, it will be more than 1 in 4.
Yeah.
If you take into account the people who don't consider themselves part of that as well. And if you think about the billions that they will spend online per year, it's over 10 billion. I think it's 4 billion if I took the number. But I think if you consider that scope, all you're doing is, one, cutting out those like people who need that additional support. You're potentially losing revenue, losing leads, if we put it that bluntly. But then you're also cutting out the fact that they will go to a friend and say, I can't use that website.
Yeah.
And then you're losing trust with other people. And actually word of mouth in that instance can become quite a negative space.
Yeah, I know we touched on this, but reputational damage in that space can be quite big. I'm conscious of sort of the last 5 minutes. Really, what I want to give people is those practical tips to take away, Johnny. So again, why do high-performing pages, what do high-performing pages do differently?
And I'll touch on these ones quite quickly, but effectively, as I touched on before, is remove distraction. Monzo's a really good example whereby the navigation is so simple. They've really tried to strip this back. They're not giving you multiple pages of success stories and all sorts. They are just telling you to open a free bank account. So they're even using language that just makes sure that you know there's no risk attached to this. You can go through that process. They've removed distraction. It's a really good experience of just going end to end. They are just laser focused on what they want you to do as a user.
Yeah, and also note the trust metrics that are on the screen as well around like which, etc. So, you know, they're already getting all of that in. User-centric messaging? Yeah,
so essentially understanding your audience and where they're at in that journey. Like understanding pain points is really key. We can see the example from Free Agent is that they're talking about lighten your load. They know that you will have time pressures. They know that they want to support you in that way, but they also know that they can be a little bit more casual in how they approach that and then the conversation that they have with you. So they've gone in with that straightforward price and no hidden costs. They're being upfront about these things. They're being quite casual in the content. It aligns to their brand. It aligns to their audience, and ultimately is driving users through that process.
Relevant trust signals, we touched on this, haven't we? But it's interesting, I think, where that is positioned and how we position that.
Yeah, they front center, right in the middle. Happy to show that they've got some good, strong reviews. Products have got review listings that sit with them. Products that then don't have reviews, they've just removed that. It doesn't say no reviews. It just doesn't. It just isn't in those spaces. But I think it's really important is as you then get into the basket, they offer things like PayPal, Klarna. You know, removing risk. I don't necessarily might want to put my bank details in for something that's £600.
Yeah.
So actually, let's do it through PayPal, where I have a little bit more trust in that process. It's all just leads into this trust, reduction of risk, and just helping somebody move through that process in a more simplified way.
I guess then always finish, and I think we've got a couple of minutes, but it's like, what 3 things can you do right now to boost conversion? I think like these for me are the big actionable ones that encourage people to go and have a look at their website and look at sort of how their platforms are performing. So I think like check your site speed, simplify the route to conversion, build trust quickly in a nutshell, Johnny. Do you want to touch on each one of these?
Yeah, so checking site speed, set it. Again, I'll say it multiple times, there's no point having the best journey if you're not performing strongly. Even if you're having a look at something like Page Speed Insights, go on there, put your website URL in, get an understanding of where you're at from a site speed. It'll also give you some useful tips around, is it the loading, is it the imagery, is it the formatting? Where can we sort of optimize that a little bit better, just speed up that performance and make us understand how it works a little bit better. Simplify that route to conversion, take a step back, even map those pages out and just say, what am I putting the user through end to end here? If they land and they're liking this product and we've driven them there through a paid ad, let's not put 6 steps through to making a purchase. Let's actually just put them on a page where they can add it to basket, get to the basket and get through that journey, removing some distraction on the way. And as I always say, A/B testing is your best friend in this space. Let's start and just remove pieces from the page. The best bet is look at a page and say, what would happen if I removed this?
Yeah.
And then just work on tests in that fashion to understand how we simplify a page, how we make it feel like the journey doesn't have as many stages to a conversion as possible.
And then finally, just that build trust quickly piece.
Trust is everything, and I think it's key. As we touch on, testimonials are good. If you don't necessarily have reviews in place, if you don't have something you can fall back on, absolutely use testimonials. Even better if you can get video testimonials on site, because then people understand, it feels a little bit more real. But using things like Trustpilot, FIFO, using payment options like Klarna, PayPal, all helps build a little bit of trust in that space. And it's all things that highlight these pieces, like bring it to the forefront that we have these payment options, that we have these reviews available to us, and it just helps somebody understand, actually, this platform is trusted. It's been trusted by hundreds or thousands of other people. I'm pretty safe to use this and move through this process, because there's always going to be that element of risk.
And thank you very much, Johnny. And I think it's a lovely place to finish, really, in the sense that, sort of, as I've said throughout, please do sign up for a free consultation if you want to find out a bit more about your specific site and get Johnny and his team's views on what's going on in your space. So do, you know, if you're interested in that, sign up via the link that's available right now in the chat. And again, like, for me, I think it's just a final one to say this is the first part in the series on user experience. And I know you'll be seeing this one all the way through, Johnny. As I say, I won't be here for the next one, unfortunately, but then I'll be back in the seat after that. So for me, it's like, please do join us for the next sort of MediaWorks Masterclass, looking at, again, all things user experience. So thank you very much, Johnny. And thanks for joining. Enjoy the rest of your day and have a great weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.